Noah Basketball is our new presenting sponsor of our Coaching You podcast. Noah Basketball is a shot tracking and data company that has helped change how coaches and players perfect the game's most important skill, shooting. Noah is a data service provider that uses machine learning and the latest computer vision technology to provide real-time data and feedback to improve shooting accuracy and consistency for professional and amateur basketball players. Noah has now analyzed over 570 million shots from countless high school, hundreds of college teams, and 28 NBA franchises. The technology is simply amazing. Once the system has been installed, players will be able to get immediate feedback on their shooting arc, left and right positioning, depth, makes or misses, and makes the data available to players and coaches on your mobile device. For more information about how Noah can help your team, visit noahbasketball.com. Welcome to another Coaching You podcast with the Coach Brendan Suhr, presented by Noah Basketball. Last night, as I was sitting home, there weren't a lot of good games on, and all of a sudden I flipped on, as I was going through ESPN, all of a sudden there came the 30 for 30 Dream Team special, and all of a sudden I locked in on it. I've probably seen it 5 or 6 times besides living it, and it was great to watch, something that happened all the way back in 92. And I had the honor, and I say honor of, being involved with that team, heading up their scouting, which was an amazing story in itself. We could do a pod on that alone, just traveling around the frickin' world to see all these other teams that we didn't have any knowledge of before. Most of these players were in the NBA, international players, and it was just absolutely sensational. And Chuck Daly, though, we had Chuck Daly on the staff as the head coach. Lenny Wilkins, who's one of the greatest of all time, being an assistant. And we had to have 2 college coaches. One of the assistants was Coach K, a dear friend. And then the other one was PJ Carlesimo, who had taken his team to the Final Four at Seton Hall a few years ago. And so we had this incredible coaching staff where all the guys fit perfectly. Billy Burtka, who was the longtime Lakers scout, and we had so many teams to see around the world. We would go to Spain and see the European Olympic qualifiers, spent 2 weeks over there. But there's so much there. And after Chuck finished coaching, I ended up writing a book on him. He would never let me write the book on him while he was coaching. He was so humble and said, no one wants to know no one cares what I know. And I just thought it would be an injustice not to share what he knows. And one of the sections of the book, that I wrote was called Daily-isms. And some of you know about it. The book actually was called Chuck Daly Coaching You. You can't find it anywhere. We sold out years ago, reprinted it once, haven't reprinted it again. Zach and I have talked about doing another one of, another Coaching You type of book. But I think the biggest thing about the Daily-isms was I called him a little bit of a Ben Franklin, Will Rogers, where he had these incredible expressions that I had never heard before in coaching that just were so meaningful that all of a sudden you might not have agreed with the saying when he said it, but all of a sudden down the road, you believed it, and he was so smart. These things were so true. So I want to share with you some of these. So a lot of our friends that give us feedback on our podcast, they listen to them, while they're driving a car, while they're just resting, while they're working out, while they're taking a walk or jog. But I'm going to tell you this: you need to write all of these down. So you're going to listen to it as you are now. Go back and re-listen and write every one of these down. I'm going to give you almost 50 Daly-isms, 50. And some of them are pretty self-explanatory. Others, there's a story behind each one of them. So I want to share with you right now, and I'm going to go in order, and I'm not going to number them. I'm just going to tell you, here's another one. Okay. So Chuck started out and said, he when I came and joined him with the Pistons, and I had known him since, literally, many of you know this, I've known Chuck since I went to 5-star camp at 14 years of age. So I've known him, and now here I am. We've known each other for years, and now at 36, 37 years old, I'm joining him as his associate head coach, whatever you want to call it, with the Pistons as we're going to win our first championship. And so he was now coaching me on teaching me about how he coached. Even though I had coached against him in the NBA for years, he was now giving me his philosophy. And he said to me, Brendan, coaching is about taking players where they can't take themselves. He's the originator of that. He's the one that first shared that with me. And it's so true. And every great player in any sport, whether it's a swimmer, a golfer, football, basketball player, every one of us, a singer, a musician, every one of us has a coach, and really that coach is someone that helps you perform better. And you need someone to give you that feedback. And so when he said coaching is about taking players where they can't take themselves, it slid right over my head initially. And now I'm such a believer in it because I believe every player needs one. So that's our first one. And he then followed up with it. I thought he was one of the best X and O's offensive coaches of all time. Even though the bad boys were known for their defense, he was so brilliant as an offensive tactician. But he told me, and I coaching against him, I knew how good his stuff was. But when he sat me down, he said, Brendan, I don't coach basketball with the Pistons. I coach people. And that became something that I so believed in, and I think all of us in any sport, it's not about coaching the sport you're in. It's about coaching the people. If you can't connect with those people, you're done. And so I that has been, those two things are kind of my trademarks, and kind of my belief system in coaching are those based on that. He then got into, he said, everything's about taking something that's good and making it great. And he got that from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is a business bestseller. And he told me, he said, Brendan, he said, every book I read is a coaching book. It didn't matter what the subject was about. He took it and put it into his mindset as a coach to help him. And let me share with you, if you don't understand the premise of, I'm going to give you what we used to call in the old days, Cliff Notes, of Good to Great. Good to Great, I think, is maybe one of the most efficient ways to build a team. The key to Good to Great is putting the right people on the bus, and then putting the right people in the right seats on the bus. And then this is one of the most important factors, getting the wrong people off the bus. And then make sure that you have the right person driving the bus. Hopefully that's you, the coach. But the last caveat, the last thing is the driver must know where the hell he's going. So put the right people on the bus, put the people in the right seats, get the wrong people off the bus, make sure you have the right person driving the bus, and make sure they know where they're going. That's, in other words, if you're competing, where's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? If you're, as we're in the NFL playoffs right now and finishing up the college football playoffs, if you made the playoffs, that's fantastic. But all of a sudden, when you lose in them, all of a sudden, here comes the criticism. So you better understand where your goals are. I think another thing that Chuck was really great at pointing out, that, back in the day, parents would raise their children and they would raise them as parents all the same. Chuck had this unique philosophy that I had never heard before, where he said, you have to coach every player differently. So that the next Dalyism is you must coach every player differently. So damn important, because I often talk about that if you come from a family, and you have a couple of siblings, or you have best friends, I don't know a family where if you have 2, 3, or 4 kids, they're all the same. Every one of them is different and unique. Every player is unique. Every person, all of your friends are unique. They're not all the same. So I think that's one of the things. You have to coach every player differently. And to do that, Chuck would say, to be able to coach every player differently, you have to be incredibly talented, because you must know the buttons to push with every player. And that has really helped me, because I was raised in the day of you treat everyone the same. And it's just not the case. Okay, next Dalyism. One of my favorites. And this is for teams that we talked about our last podcast about teams that are embarking on league play. All of a sudden you have a really good team. You go into the league and you open up 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, 1-2. You didn't meet the expectations of other people. There's going to be adversity. And so his saying was, coaching is like flying an airplane. There's going to be a lot of turbulence, but your job is to land the plane safely. Coaching is like flying an airplane. There's going to be a lot of turbulence, but your job is to land the plane safely. And there's not a season that I've ever had where at some point during the year, there has been adversity. There's been turbulence. And that you as the coach have to be calm, poised, and remember the goals you established as a team. And on the road to each of our championships, there were always turbulence. And even on the dream team, believe it or not, a team where we averaged winning by 43 or so points a game, players got hurt. And all of a sudden, you go with a team with Larry Bird, John Stockton, all of a sudden Larry Bird basically can't play because he's hurt his elbow so badly. John Stockton really messes his leg up badly. So things happen. You have to adapt, but you have to remain calm, and you got to land the plane safely. One of my favorites, he says, is get past mad. That's the Dalyism. Get past mad. I think a lot of times as coaches, we hold grudges against your players, against other coaches. Your job is to get your team ready for the next game, especially after a loss. You have to get past being mad, and you have to really master the concept of moving forward. And I think that's one of the really key things. And getting mad, get past mad with people, your athletic director, your principal, someone that you work with. I think it's really, really important. Next Dalyism, he had a saying that I never understood in the beginning, and it was called whatever. When he didn't want to give what I called an honest response to a question that maybe a media person asked him, he would just say, whatever. And it was really one of the great expressions of all time, because whatever means nothing. It's whatever you want to make it. And so really, he never got in trouble with our players or with someone, because he knew how to deflect things. It's a great saying. Put it in your back pocket, because trust me, you will need it, because all you have to do is watch the different interviews on ESPN after any game, and you watch player or coach insert their foot in their mouth in an interview post-game. I think it's really, really important. So whatever is something that we really valued. The next Dalyism, and one of my favorites, was never trust happiness. This was one of Chuck's favorites, because it was really to guard against teams that became complacent. He loved to use this after a big win, or if we were going to play a really bad team. If we had won 4 or 5 games in a row, he would start practice and say to the team, never trust happiness, because when you're winning, you are almost become giddy at how good you are. And I think that that's the easiest way to fall on your face. So he just was always out there. And I can remember literally when we were up on the Lakers in the finals 3-0, and they had two players that were out and they weren't going to play in the fourth game in LA. And as he and I were going to lunch, I said, I can't believe we're going to win the championship tonight. This is incredible. I'm saying this to him. And he says, I don't know how we're going to win another game. He was always like that. He would never let himself get to that point where he became overconfident. And I think it's a great saying, never trust happiness. Another one that we used a lot was, when you talk about your players, a lot of people don't think players are that smart. Trust me, they're highly intelligent, in street smarts, street cred. They understand. So he had a wonderful expression that he said, you can't fool dogs, kids, or NBA players. And you can insert high school or college players. You can't fool dogs. And dogs, if it's pouring rain outside or if it's freezing cold and you try to get your dog to go out in the backyard or take a walk with you, they know they're not want to go out there and get wet or freeze their ass off. So they don't want to go out. If you have a little kid at home and you want to put them to bed and say, dad or mom is going to take you upstairs and read a book to you, they know you're trying to put their ass to bed. And the same thing, if you tried to bullshit an NBA player, they know it. So, you can't fool dogs, kids, or NBA players. It's a wonderful saying. And I really think that, one of the things that, we tried to do was when our players would literally call us out on that if we tried to pull some shit over on them, to be honest with you. And I think it's really, really good. And I can remember a lot of times in a timeout where Chuck would call a play and one of the players would tap me on the knee and what he wanted me to do was to speak up. And then literally I would tap Chuck and say, and when he acknowledged me, I'd say, Chuck, why don't we do this instead? And basically he always, deflected to me because he knew that he might have said something wrong, was making a wrong call. And I can remember that happening on numerous occasions. But I think the biggest thing was we got it right. And the players are looking at you in the timeout because they're really good players. And they're saying, that shit ain't going to work. Don't do that, And if you didn't say anything, they would say, why don't you step up? So it's really important that you have that trust with your players and coaches that, that you always get it right. You try to get it right. Chuck was amazing. I used to think he was negative. And so I would say, Chuck, God, you're such, I was the optimist and he was what I thought was a real pessimist. And he had this wonderful saying where he'd say, I'm not a pessimist, but rather an optimist with experience. What a great, in other words, he's been an optimist, but he's done some of the stuff that I'm thinking it was going to work, but it didn't work. And so I can remember that literally one of the greatest sports writers ever in the country from the Boston Globe, Bob Ryan, he literally named Chuck the Prince of Pessimism because all the negativity around all the day, because he never would allow himself to get overconfident. And it was really an amazing line that he dubbed him with, the Prince of Pessimism. And as I told you before, he would never let himself get to that point of feeling that he wanted to be like me and be that optimist. He was a pessimist because he was an optimist with experience. One night we were playing in Boston. They had a phenomenal brand new bridge built across the Charles River there, going over to Cambridge from Boston. And we lost a terrible game to the Celtics. And as we came out after the game, and he and I were going to walk back to the hotel. We weren't going to take the bus back. It wasn't too far away. And, you know, and he looked out, and I was so down after the game we blew to the Celtics, who were so great. You know, he looked out and he saw this beautiful lit bridge, and his saying was, "You see that bridge over there? I'm not jumping." You have to make sure that you, under pressure, are not the one that's falling apart. You're not going to jump. You have to stay strong. He was always so composed. I never saw anyone after a game that you lost more composed. Many coaches I worked for would go into the locker room, rip the player's ass after they lost, and felt better after that for themselves. But, you know, you win and lose together in this business. And he would just be calm and say, you can't get too excited. You can't get to that point where the players see you sweating. And I thought that was really, really important for them. Coaches, are you looking to take your game preparation to the next level? Then Fast Model Sports is the perfect coaching software for you. With FastDraw, build an organized library of plays and drills and create professional playbooks to share with your players and staff. You can also download over 9,500 free plays and drills from our Playbank directly to your FastDraw account. Looking for a better way to build your scouting reports and want to include video? With FastScout, build custom scouting report templates to prepare your team best for each individual opponent. Plus, did you know with the latest updates from Fast Model Sports, you can now include video with your FastScout reports and share with your coaches and staff, all within the FastScout mobile app. The combination of FastDraw and FastScout is by far the best way for you and your coaches to create winning game strategies and effectively communicate them to your team. Over 10,000 high school and youth coaches trust Fast Model Sports products to help their teams reach their goals. To order, go to fastmodelsports.com. Use code COACHINGU15 to get 15% off any FastDraw or FastScout products. Remember, go to fastmodelsports.com. Use code COACHINGU15 to get 15% off any FastDraw and FastScout products. This is one of my favorites because I think as a coach, we think every decision we make is right 95% of the time. I was like that. His saying was, all decisions are 50-50. And I say, 50-50? Half of the time they're right, half wrong? And he said, absolutely. And he proved it to me many times by when I would tell him to take a player out and put another player back in because he was the better player. All of a sudden, we'd put that better player back in. He'd go 1 for 8. The player we took out was 4 for 5. So he would always tell me that, you know, you make decisions based on what's your instinct, your knowledge, and everything. But when you make them, don't look back. But don't expect to be right more than half the time. And it really helps you in your decision making. Because if you think you're never wrong, you're going to really have a sad life, because the decisions you make in business, in coaching, and in life, 50-50. Trust me. One night we were playing, and here's the saying was, you don't have many ideas tonight. We had won the night before, 2 nights before against the Lakers, blew them out. 2 nights later, we're on the road and we're playing maybe Sacramento or someone on the West Coast trip, and we're getting our ass kicked. We're down 30 points. And the night when we were beating the Lakers, I had every idea, every play call, everything I said worked. And the more we scored, the better ideas I had. All of a sudden, 2 days later, we're losing by 30. I'm like a church mouse. You can't hear me for nothing. And he turned to me and he said, you don't have many ideas tonight, do you? So that was like, you got to coach regardless of the score. Don't just coach when we're winning. Don't just come up with ideas and throw ideas at me when we're winning. have them when I need them, when we're getting our butt kicked. And that was a great lesson for me, because all of a sudden when you're down 30, you don't think anything you're going to call is working, but don't stop coaching, just like you don't want your players to stop playing. Nobody looks bad in a blue suit. He loved to dress. He was one of the best. Him and Pat Riley were the two best dressed coaches in the NBA. And he just used to say that he loved blue suits. He literally had about 60 variations of blue suits with pinstripes and plain, different fabric. He loved suits. Now, the reason he had so many suits was he didn't have to pay for any of them either. He was giving them with his deals. So, but he had this wonderful saying. He said, nobody looks bad in a blue suit. And no matter what you wear, you just wear a different shirt, different color tie, and you'll look great. And I never forgot it. And it's really, and he was the best at fashion. So remember, when you're getting dressed up, wear a blue suit. Another saying was never look back. You know, when you take a position and, you become a head coach. We have a couple of our clients here that we work with at Coaching You, Zach and I, and they become head coaches, high school coaches, or whatever, for the first time. All of a sudden they were idea people before, they were suggestion people. Now all of a sudden they're the person calling the shots. And that's great. So never look back really means that when now you get into that chair of being the boss, you have to make decisions. And every big decision that you make, you just can't look back. You make the decisions based, as I said before, on your gut instincts, your knowledge of the topic and subject. But also when you make it, don't second guess yourself. Don't look back. It's really great advice. And I remember him giving that to Joe Dumars when he became president of the Pistons. And he told Joe, going from a player to president of a team, don't look back. One of our other favorite things with the media is he would say, make it a one-day story. Making it a one-day story is, don't argue with the media, because you can't win. We used to say they had the pen last, or they had the typewriter last. But now they have their telephone, they have their computer last. So they can keep this thing going. So make everything a one-day story. If someone writes something bad about you, let it fly. Don't keep stirring it up, because that would be bad. And never get in a fight. His other saying was, never get in a fight with a person who buys ink by the barrel. In other words, the people in the media, they have unlimited opportunities, and now even more so. It used to be we would go against newspaper people, but now everyone is a media person, from bloggers to podcasters, TV people. Everyone can be an expert. I have one of our clients is right now, a college coach. He doesn't even know who the person is that's covering them, because the person never comes up and interviews him. And so he's writing his stuff every day without even having to talk to them. So all I know is, don't handle yourself with class. Don't get in fights. You can't win. And when you see this happening in the media, when you're watching ESPN and stuff, that's when coaches get in trouble. You can't win with someone who always is going to have the last word. All right, let's get back to basketball. We would constantly use this phrase during the game to encourage our players, to keep playing and to keep it close. Some nights we weren't playing good, and especially when we were on the road, we'd tell our guys to hang around. That was the expression. I love 1 and 2 word phrases. We would tell them to hang around. In other words, keep playing, keep it close, and we'd win this game in the fourth quarter. So if you ever watch NBA games in the playoffs, especially, and they'll give you all access during timeouts, you say, God, those coaches don't speak that great. They don't use really good sentences. What they do is they speak in headlines and sound bites, phrases. They would get a F if they were in my elementary school English class because they didn't know how to put a sentence together. But what they will do is they will emphasize the things that are important to their team. Keep playing, get a stop. Don't get blocked out. Make sure guard. Let's get it one stop. Let's guard. Let's get a rebound. Next offensive stop will win the. Next time we score, we'll win the game. Every little phrase helps you during a timeout. You have to know how to do that. So one of the phrases that we used was to play 48 minutes. In your case, if you're a high school coach, play 32. Play 40 if you're a college coach. So, one of the things was play 48 minutes. That was our mantra. That was a cry invented by one of our players, that to play every minute of every game. So, they would say, in other words, every possession, every minute, every game is important. And that was a reminder to say, we're going to play all 32, play 32 minutes, play 40, play 48. That was something that, and all the time when we're coming out of a timeout, we would use a phrase, and usually it was one of our players, and, to encourage them to keep playing and how important it was. Another Daly-ism that we had was defensively, keeping on the same thing, was to get one stop. Out of every timeout, if we were coming out on defense, we'd remind our guys to get one stop. And if you can get one stop, hopefully that will multiply. You can get some momentum defensively. You have different teams that believe, in things like, 7, if you can stop a team from scoring 7 straight times, that's a kill, and all those different things. That's great. That's really what we're talking about, getting a stop. Because if you just keep exchanging baskets, the best you can do is hope to tie the game. So we want to come out. We want to remind our guys. We tell them to get one stop, get a stop. And I think it's really, and, I believe that if you can get your team to get 3 stops in a row, that's when you can increase the gap in the score. So 3 stops. Some teams have a goal of 7 or 8 in college or the NBA in a longer time game. If you can get 7, 3 stops during a game, that's 21 times they didn't score. So now you're giving your guys short-term and long-term goals. Really, really important. But get one stop is the Daly-ism. Coaching is a damn hard business. Really, really hard. And, I think a lot of us, if you coach a long, long time, chances are you're going to lose your job. We do a lot of coaching with coaches that lose their jobs. It's happened to me. Chuck Daly, I think the greatest NBA coach I've ever seen. He goes from an assistant coach of the Philadelphia 76ers with Billy Cunningham to the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He lasted 93 days. Got hired during the season. As the season was going on, was fired 93 days later. Okay. And then became, in 12, 13 years, one of the greatest coaches of all time and the coach of our first dream team. And I think that, what happens is, you learn the expression, every step is a struggle. Every step is a struggle. Each game is difficult. Each and every one of them gets harder. Each job you have is a hard job. I don't care if you're coaching the University of Kentucky, UCLA in the college ranks, if you're coaching the LSU women, the UCLA women, or the South Carolina women. Dawn Staley, she's got a hard job. Expectations are through the roof. So the better the job, the higher the expectations. But every job is hard. But every time when you're going through this, every opportunity, every game is a struggle. And when you lose your job, this profession is so hard. So if you're in this a long time, you have to understand that this is just because you get a job, it's not going to be a smooth trend upwards. You don't know what's going to happen. But you have to understand the mentality of understanding coaching is at an all-time high. There's so many outside factions that will determine your success. I can go on and on about the college game, the portal, NIL. I can go about high school. I can talk about parents in high school. I can talk about booster clubs. I can talk about your principal. I can talk about your AD, a basketball coach in a football school in high school. I talk about all of that. So there's very few jobs. And even my friend Kevin Boyle at Mount Verde, who's the best, has the best record of any high school coach in America, modern day Morgan Wooten from DeMatha, the expectations are through the roof. No one expects Kevin to ever lose a game because his success is at such an unprecedented level. So understand, it's what you make of your job, handle the expectations, and understand this stuff is hard. This is really hard. The next one, ironically, is that nothing easy is the Daly-ism, nothing easy. But what I mean by that is not an easy job or anything like we were just talking about, is that try to make each possession on defense really hard to score on us. Don't give them anything easy. Fight your man for position. Don't let them score easy baskets. This is one of our headlines that we say to our players. Don't let them have anything easy. Again, I love those sound bites that you can talk to your players and all of a sudden, you give up an easy shot. They now understand. I believe that coaches will speak a language. Unlike anything else, it's their language. It's the language for your team. Brendan's language is different than Tom Izzo's language. That's different than John Calipari's. It's different than Kim Mulkey's language. Every coach's language is different. Steve Kerr speaks differently than Doc Rivers. They have to resonate and speak the way that means the most to them, but they're players. And everyone that's in that program, every assistant coach, has to speak the same language as the head coach. And I think that's really, really important. You can't have one assistant coach saying, hey, we're going to run a backdoor here, and then the head coach is saying, no, we back cut. Everyone has to speak the same language. I could say dribble a handoff as a phrase. I might use DHO, and you might say, well, let's just run a zoom action. We have to speak the same way. Okay. Next Daly-ism, no warm-up jumpers. That was another way Chuck would say, guard your man and get a hand in his face to the shooter. There's nothing like, this is not like shooting in practice with no defense on you. We don't want to give warm-up jumpers. We don't want to give the jumpers that you take in practice where we have no defense on it. We want to contest every shot. We don't believe in giving up open threes. We guard people. You make a three, that's fine, but we're contesting threes, so we don't give up warm-up jumpers. The terminology he used is great. Again, the players knew exactly. It basically meant an unguarded shot. Okay. Again, I told you in the beginning, I'm the optimist on our staff, Chuck and I. I'm the optimist. I would come to him with this great idea. I said, man, this is great. And he would just say these 3 words. It won't work. It won't work. I would get so pissed off when I first heard that because I'm giving him an idea that I know can really help us. And he said, it won't work. But that I found out later on was his way of getting buy-in, not just from me, but from our players. And when I put in the Jordan rules during the playoffs with input from Isaiah Thomas, all of a sudden I said, Chuck, I think this is a hell of an idea. Now, we're the best defensive team in the NBA. We have the two best defensive players in the NBA on one team, Dennis Rodman and Joe Dumars. And Michael got loose the day before in the second half, and he went for, 47 points, 39 in the second half against the best team at home. And we lose instead of being up a series. And now all of a sudden we go down, and now we're down 2-1 in the playoffs in a 7-game series. And Isaiah came to me with the idea of double teaming Jordan, getting the ball out of his hands. We knew that, having played Michael so many times, 30 plus times, we knew he was incredibly unselfish, that if we double teamed him, he would pass the ball. But the players did not want Jordan to beat us. All except two players, Rodman and Dumars. They wanted to guard him because that's the two guys that handled him during the game. So when I go to Chuck and tell him this is what I think we should do, he tells me it won't work. We go to our team meeting before our walkthrough, and the players are really receptive to it, except those two players. Now you have the two best defensive players in the league on your team, and they are pissed. Basically, you're blaming them for losing the game. So Chuck says, that's not going to work. No way. We're not doing it. And now the other 10 are saying, let us try it. Let us try it. Said, no, it's not going to work. And they won't stop. They just say, let us do it, coach. Let us do it. And finally he says, you can do it. You'll see it. I'm right and you're wrong because it's not going to work. So what he did is he stood up for his two best defenders, and he told them not going to work. But they were such great teammates that they understood their teammates. All they cared about was winning. They weren't calling them out, and we did it. And for 3 straight games, Mike never scored more than 17 points, and we won all 3 games. Hence, that was the start of the Jordan rules. But it all came not because he patted me on the back with this great idea. He basically said, this shit ain't going to work. It will not work. So he was an expert at creating buy-in. However you do that, that is the ultimate thing in coaching, is to get buy-in. Your players have to believe in you. They have to believe in what you're teaching them. And I thought that was one of the really great things that opened my eyes up. It was my first year with him. It was 5 months into coaching together. And I'm saying, wow. And I go from thinking this guy is so negative to this, that all of a sudden I found out a genius at getting buy-in. This is the end of part 1. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. There's so much to share. I get so excited when I talk about Chuck, one of the great, great coaches of all time, but more importantly, one of the great coaches of people, the way he understood them. Next week, I'll share part 2 with some more really stuff that you'll love to hear that will really be influential in your coaching career, because that's the point of all this. Till next week, this is the coach, Brendan Suhr.